Welcome to See, I told you. Welcome to Your Town. I'm the culinary host, Chef Wendy Brodie, and my guest today is Shelley Post of Four Sisters Inn, a management company of multiple hotel or boutique properties. Thank you so much for joining me today. And one of the things I was so thrilled and surprised about is your cookbook. I had no idea after all these years we've peripherally known each other that you have a wonderful cookbook in its 7th edition.
Yes.
So why don't we start out, though, a little bit, give me a little of your background, starting in Pasadena.
In Pasadena. Well, I was born and raised in Pasadena. However, my parents moved up to the Monterey Peninsula in the early 70s, and we moved into the Green Gables Inn, which had previously been run as a bed and breakfast inn. However, we were just living there as a family. And it was a wonderful, obviously a magical spot, and went to high school here locally. And one day, my father was approached by the city of Pacific Grove and was told that he needed to be reporting some TOT tax in order to retain the business license. And that is really how we first got involved in the innkeeping business. My father had been a mortgage banker and a real estate developer, and so added this new role. And really the company expanded from there. We now operate 18 properties throughout California. We still have the Green Gables Inn and Gosby House Inn here in Pacific Grove, and Coachman's Inn over in Carmel that you probably know as well.
Yeah.
And then many properties up in both the Napa and Sonoma wine countries, Santa Cruz, and then down in Southern California in Orange County, Santa Monica, and the Inland Empire in Claremont. So
no wonder you're on the run, traveling all over, and recently married too. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I got married about 3 years ago to a wonderful man, and so that has been, just a very lovely.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
You also spent time in France, I see, according to your bio, and of course fluent in French. I'm not such, but...
I did. I actually, when I finished college, I moved to France and worked for a nonprofit and called Young Life, and was there for about 5 years. And so the love of France, particularly Provence, is reflected in a number of the properties, particularly those up in the wine country, where there's so many similarities between the French wine country and the Napa Valley. So yes, I enjoyed traveling and traveled for many, many years throughout France and Europe, and picked up many little pieces of art and fun trinkets that are on display in many of the hotels today. So,
oh, that's incredible. The other thing, when I read about your France trip, I was assuming that it would help you with your love of food and your interest. Once I knew you had the cookbook, and anyway, it's just so beautiful.
Well, thank you. So, as I brought, this was the very first cookbook that we created, and it is obviously just a compilation of index cards with the recipes on it. And I believe this was probably in the early 80s, but I'm really not quite sure when this first one was done. And fast forward through obviously 6 editions, some of which were illustrated by my children, to the current edition, which has professional photography. And it's a really fun group of recipes. Some of them are my recipes. I love to cook. Certainly, I should say that very carefully with a professional, extraordinary chef such as yourself, but I love to cook. And so some of my recipes are included, as well as guest recipes. We've hosted recipe contests over the years, and many recipes from those the cooks from the different inns. So it's a fun cookbook, very easy to make, recipes primarily focused around breakfast, brunch, and then wine and hors d'oeuvres in the afternoon. So
oh, perfect. Well, I want to just hold these up. So this is where we got the start. Your first one, I
Yes.
think that's so great, sort of wonderful cloth. This kind of reminds me when I worked at John Gardner's tennis ranch. All their recipes were on little cards like that. And now the current edition in a beautifully photographed book like this. I'm so excited to have it in my collection now.
well, I am very thrilled to give it to you, and hope you enjoy making a few of these recipes. One of the things that we have said over all of these years at Four Sisters is that we are really in the business of making memories. And so many memories are created around the dining table and time with friends and family. And so I think this is an opportunity for guests to take this back home with them, remember their times that they had spent in the hotels, and those really precious moments of downtime.
I think that's so wise. And just in case, I mean, do you sell this to the public too, so people
Yes.
could sneak in and
Absolutely,
get a copy?
absolutely. You can either get one at one of the inns, or you can go online at foursisters.com and order one, and we'll just mail it to you.
Oh, well, now with a lot of the recipes that are in there, are there anything, or I mean, sure there's several, that became memories for you and made brunch or afternoon delights? And if so, which are some of your favorites? I know they all are, but what do you
That's right.
think a few might be?
Well, there certainly the muesli was something that I made for my children growing up, and it was inspired by the recipe developed by a Swiss doctor many years ago. And of course, I don't make it with full cream as was originally the recipe, but it was a very favorite breakfast recipe of the family for many years. You could just soak your oats overnight and then add all types of fresh fruit in the morning. A wonderful, healthy recipe to get the day started. So certainly that was one that stands out. Of course, the cookies, the cakes, the treats are all wonderful. Don't make as many of those anymore these days, but certainly love to entertain and make some of those. The chocolate. There's a number of chocolate cookies that are my absolute favorite. I love shortbread as well. Of course, the list can go on. There are just far too many treats. One of the iconic recipes in Four Sisters is actually called Special K cookies, and it is made with Special K. And although we might think that causes it to be healthy, Wendy, that is really not the case based on the amount of butter and sugar that goes along with it. But it's a fun recipe that's been around for many years. Coconut macaroons are, of course, another favorite, and the wedding cookies, which are certainly one of my favorites, with powdered sugar and butter. And
almost every country has a version
of those. Yes.
Oh gosh, yes. Food, I just never get tired of either thinking about or hearing about. And
yes.
And so in the inns, when it's late afternoon, is it more of a high tea? Not so much. Hors d'oeuvres?
It's really hors d'oeuvres.
Okay.
And it's certainly varied over the years. It's interesting to think about people's tastes back in the 70s, 80s, and then up until today. And the evolution of hors d'oeuvres has really followed many of our eating preferences and how they have really developed often changed over the years. Many years ago, we used to always have a crudité platter with a dip. And then oftentimes a savory, such as a artichoke dip, a hot artichoke dip, which was quite delicious, and then very often a sweet. And then, of course, that we don't eat quite as rich variety of foods these days.
That still sounds good to me.
They are all wonderful. Absolutely, they're all wonderful. But we do serve a variety of dips, such as hummus dip or red pepper hummus dip, some interesting spinach dips that are not quite this, as rich as the ones from, again, years ago, but oftentimes homemade pita chips, and we'll do roasted garlic. A number of hotels do a charcuterie and cheese platter in the afternoons, dried fruits and nuts to go along with it, olives. Again, many of our inns in the wine country are located in areas where they do wonderful, wonderful olives and olive oils. So we oftentimes include that as well, and certainly some local wine as a way to encourage people to gather at the end of the day. Some folks really enjoy that time to meet other people around a glass of wine and some cheese, and or just the opportunity to sit on your patio and look at the, to look at these incredible views that we have all over California, in every region, and take that time to relax and unwind a little bit.
I was so impressed at a group we both belong to, and when the threat of the fires, after having them in our own backyard here, and then recently up north, and we didn't have here the loss of communication, which when you were describing what some of the things you had to was a loss of communication. So from my perspective, you had to leave right away and go up and find out what was happening. Do you mind sharing some of the key things that you're probably still going on with, but we didn't quite have the threat in the same way, and some of the lessons you were telling us about, I think, would benefit, all of us watching this. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that, would be great.
Certainly. I think it was certainly an extraordinary experience. Received the phone call about 1 in the morning from one of my managers, and said that there were fires raging. She wasn't quite sure where they were and wanted to know should we evacuate the hotel, etc. And certainly in October, which is our busiest season of the year, busiest month of the year in the wine country, and all of the hotels are full. It was a big decision to make, to evacuate guests. Where do we send people? How do we make sure they're safe? And talked it through, attempted to get good advice from the authorities to guide us as to where we should be relocating people. And so after spending quite a bit of time with my various managers, we do have 9 properties in the Napa and Sonoma wine country, so there were a lot of people with whom to communicate. Decided it would be best if I just drove up and was there on the ground. And so that is what I did. I left in the middle of the night, and after we made the decision to evacuate everybody and locate the folks in more dangerous areas, particularly the Kenwood and Glen Ellen areas, to downtown Sonoma. And certainly it was a very, very challenging situation with fires raging in both the Napa and the Sonoma valleys, loss of cell service, loss of internet, and
refrigeration too.
Refrigeration, certainly all of the items in our refrigerators and freezers were all perishables that had to be thrown out. So there was significant loss in certainly in all of the food products. I was very, very happy to say that we had no injuries. No one was hurt at any of the hotels. None of them sustained significant damage. Several of them remain closed for quite some time, and actually the Kenwood Inn and Spa just reopened this week.
Wow.
Quite a bit of smoke damage at that property, and took quite some time. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous property with a lot of lovely, lovely plaster work, and the smoke really seeped into the plaster, and it was necessary to replace the plaster. So it was pretty much an extraordinary experience. That, along with a couple of earthquakes that I've lived through between the Loma Prieta and the Napa earthquake a number of years ago, and certainly it was an extraordinary opportunity to think about how do we provide that level of customer service to people who are here and staying in our properties on vacation, or looking for a relaxing romantic getaway, and find themselves being evacuated in the middle of the night, which is very, 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 very scary. It's dark, and it was very difficult to see, and obviously the fires were raging very close by. There was an extraordinary amount of tragedy that befell so many people in the area, and many of our staff who were there to assist our guests had to leave their homes and their families in the middle of the night to go assist others. And that was certainly a choice that they made, certainly took care of their own families as well, but really made me very, very proud to see how people rallied together to assure people, to provide as much information to them as we possibly could. And as I drove up to the Inn at Sonoma, where we had relocated people, and it was about 5 in the morning, and I mentioned to a couple of my managers, I said, I think it's time to make some hot coffee and a lovely breakfast. And so we had probably 100 people from other hotels joining the guests of that particular property for a lovely breakfast that was cooked by several of my managers, in addition to the kitchen staff. So it was a moment to be proud of how the team came together and worked as really truly as a team to get through this experience.
Well, that's really what my husband, when he ran Ventana, went through a lot of those things. And the guess, as frightening as it is, with somebody at the helm that, like yourself, that is relaxed and reassuring. He never lost a customer, and I'm sure with all of your guests, they would have been more sorry for you and your position, and I'm sure you made them feel just special and wonderful, and they want to come back and recapture what they intended their trip
absolutely.
to be.
We have a wonderful group of guests, and as frightening as it was, we made it through and received so many letters and cards of thanks.
Thank you so much. I look forward to having you again sometime.
Well, thank you, Wendy. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.